One of the reasons we're able to do that is that over the last decade, starting probably with the PISA results published in 2000, a set of international benchmarkings that showed how countries compared. There are other benchmarking exercises too that compare education systems performance. We're now getting really significant data on a time series of what good school systems look like. So the report that was mentioned in the citation when bringing forward my honorary fellowship here mentioned the report that we wrote, how the world's best performing school systems come out on top. And we literally took the data from the PISA comparisons and TIMSS and one or two others, and we said, what do the systems that keep coming out on top in these international benchmarking exercises do? How do they do that? What we're able to do now, we've got a time sequence, is take systems that have changed over a period of time, that say in the mid-90s or early, the beginning of the last decade, were in the middle of the table and have now gone to the top, and be able to analyse what did they do to improve themselves. And in December of this year, we'll publish the follow-up report looking at how school systems, whole systems, have improved. This data, this information, this set of insights is really important because for most of the time that the College of Teachers has existed, actually politicians around the world, leading administrators around the world, did their best with the information they have, but they didn't have the data, the evidence, the research on which to base insights in how to reform whole systems. And so they published white papers like the famous one in 1944, or indeed the Plowden report mentioned earlier in 1967, that were important, pulling together the evidence they had at the time, but rarely taking a whole system perspective and thinking about how to shift the systems on. But colleagues, given the challenges these young people are going to face when they grow up, wherever whether in Pakistan like these children or in the United Kingdom like the children from Aldersbrook or anywhere else on the planet, the challenges they're going to face mean that we have an urgent challenge of doing the very best we can to reform education systems, not just in this country, but right around the world as effectively as we can, as soon as we can, because the better systems are doing such a quite different job from the less effective systems. And the more effective we can make our education systems, the more likely are the children in the picture or the children who were dancing a few minutes ago will be able to meet the challenges, the very daunting challenges that face them in the first half of the 21st century. So before I come to some of the characteristics of effective systems, I just wanted to spend a bit of time talking about what we think the children should be learning. It's one thing to say we want an effective system, but before that we need to say, well, what would we like the effective system to enable the children to learn? And because I'm in the presence of some fantastic maths and science educators, Johnny Ball and Michael Rice among them, I thought I'd summarise what I think the curriculum of the future should be in an equation. Should come up any minute there. So this is my attempt to summarise the curriculum of the future in 4 letters. Start inside the bracket. It's quite clear that children need some knowledge in the future. Sometimes you hear debates in education, why do we need to teach knowledge? You can just Google it. Well, not really. There's a lot of knowledge that you need to be able to do without Googling it, whether it's being able to read and write well for a start so that you can read what comes up on Google, but also some mathematical calculation, something about the country you live in, something about the world you live in, and so on. So there's a body of knowledge that we do need to pass on. Because the amount of knowledge in the world is expanding rapidly, it's extraordinarily difficult to select the right knowledge, and that's why you get vigorous curriculum debates, whether it's in Australia where they're currently introducing a new national curriculum, or here endlessly, or wherever it might be. But nevertheless, some knowledge to high standards is really important. But nobody thinks, I think, that knowledge on its own is enough. So the K stands for knowledge, but the next letter in the bracket is plus T, which is thinking, something that Johnny Ball and others have spent much of their time trying to promote. Because knowledge, dry knowledge, knowledge on its own, knowledge that's just a set of facts that can be recited or recycled in a pub quiz, may have its own value and intrinsic merit, but it's not really useful until you can think about it, you can analyse it, you can critique it, you can connect apparently unconnected pieces of knowledge, you can put them together and build new ideas, whether logically or creatively, inductively or deductively. And what you see in many of the best schools is teachers who teach that thinking through whatever the content they're teaching is, whether it's maths or science, on which there's a great body of evidence, but also history and English, and indeed games, art, drama, music and dance. So K plus T seems important. Sometimes people say, don't they, knowledge is power. But actually knowledge on its own, for the reasons I've just given, isn't power at all. Knowledge plus K plus T may be closer to power if you've got knowledge and you can think about it and apply it in new situations. But even those two things on their own aren't really enough to be powerful. How many times have you left a meeting where a decision's been made and somebody walks out with you and they say, I didn't agree with that? And you say, well, why didn't you say so? And they say, well, I didn't think it was the right time. The decision's gone. The decision's been made. They had the knowledge, they'd done the thinking, but they didn't intervene at the point of decision. If you don't intervene at the point of decision, by definition, you're not powerful. So having the K plus the T isn't enough. You also need the L, and the L is leadership. And here I don't just mean leading big organizations, important though that is, as we've heard this morning. I mean the ability to be influential in all kinds of situations, whether your family, your classroom, your workplace, your community. So leadership, I mean in terms of exercising influence. And to me, it seems really important that the children that were pictured on the screen before, leave school not just with knowledge, not just with the capacity to think, but also the capacity to lead in the definition that I've just given. So K plus T plus L. If all children left school with that, I would have a great deal more confidence than I do currently about our ability to tackle the challenges of the 21st century. But outside the bracket, there's an E, and there's an E for a reason, because you could have knowledge and the ability to think and the ability to lead, but you could use it for all the wrong purposes. So the E stands for ethical underpinning. You see, in the multicultural, diverse world that we live in, those big cities that I was talking about earlier, we need children who grow up believing that it's better to live in a diverse city, that people from different backgrounds need to find ways of getting on with each other, and indeed of thriving in relationship to each other, of making a virtue out of difference and diversity. That's a value. That's an ethical position. It's not inevitable. And when you look back over the 20th century, you see that in this country, in the early 20th century, most children would get a similar ethical education from the church, from the family and the school. But you can't rely on that anymore, because people's backgrounds are diverse, family structures are different, the world is full of change. But the school is the one social institution which can, and you see it in the way the children were performing earlier, often does, the schools often do, provide that ethical underpinning. It's not something you want governments to specify, an ethical underpinning by definition. It's something that professionals in school have to design their schools to be able to do. But to me, that is the curriculum we want, not just for the children at Aldersbrook, not just for children across the United Kingdom, but for children across the world. And obviously there's lots of detail to add to that. And you see these debates being played out in the curriculum debate in Alberta or Australia, where I mentioned earlier, or indeed in the United States, where a number of the states are debating this as we speak. But if that's the what, if that's what we want children to learn, what would systems need to look like to bring that about for every child? Well, as I say, there's an emerging knowledge base. It's difficult to summarise it on one PowerPoint slide, but I've attempted to do that here.